I always get creeped out in this place. Sometimes I wonder if somebody's living here. I'm joking, but I actually wonder that sometimes. Hi there, yo folks. My name is Sean, the Modern Yeoman, and recently I came to the realization that we're almost halfway through the year. It's hard to believe, I know, and given the fleeting nature of time and our lives in general, I was tempted to spin out into some kind of existential crisis when I came to that realization. Instead, however, I figured I'd use this opportunity to revisit the goals I set for the homestead at the beginning of the year and see how I'm doing against them. A kind of homestead report card. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please indulge me for a very brief history. Back in September, my wife Holly and I bought this house and the surrounding 4 acres here in East Tennessee with the intention to grow our own crops and raise our own animals, despite having little to no knowledge of either farming or animal husbandry. Shortly after we bought our house, my parents bought the property right next to it. There's a little house there along with 6 acres. So between my wife and I and my parents, we share about 10 acres of property that we're trying to turn into a functional working homestead. We've been documenting this journey since September on this channel, The Modern Yeoman. Lots of hijinks have ensued. This past January, I created a list of goals that I have for the homestead this year and collected them in an episode. You can find a link to that particular presentation in the pop-up that should be appearing above my left shoulder right now. Today, I'd like to quickly go through each one of those goals and give myself an informal grade on how I've performed in meeting them so far. There's several of them, so this is going to be a speed round. Are you ready? I am. Let's go. This goal is pretty cut and dry. In January, I gave myself the intention of getting meat birds, meat chickens, on the homestead by the end of the year. And I think we're well on our way to doing that. But we don't have meat chickens just yet. We're actually making really good progress on finishing the meat chicken tractor, and we just need to order some of the supplies that we'll need to harvest them. Things like the plucker, the scalder, the freezer to store them in, things like that, which we should hope to order by the end of June or so. I honestly see a run date of 20 to 25 meat chickens sometime in August or September. So with all of that being said, I think I'm going to give myself a B for this particular goal, not an A, because I would have liked to have finished this meat chicken tractor sooner, but I think we've done pretty well, all things considered, so B it is. Back in January, I phrased this goal as raised beds, but in all actuality, I meant the garden. It was a really important goal to us at the time because we wanted to start growing as quickly as we could. I'm happy to say that we built the raised beds and got the garden figured out fairly quickly. So I'm going to give myself a B on this particular goal as well, simply because we made some pretty newbie gardening rookie mistakes, like putting the vegetables out before the last frost date. We could have been a little bit further along than we are now if we hadn't have made that kind of silly mistake. So this one's going to be a B as well. If you watch the channel regularly, then you know the havoc that the storms of the rainy season have brought on our homestead, and drainage has been at least a huge issue for us here. This spot that I'm standing in during the rainy season is typically about ankle deep in mucky water. Fact is, though, I haven't really done anything to deal with my drainage problems other than just watch and see where things flood up. Therefore, I'm going to give myself a C. I'm giving myself a grade of C because I haven't done anything, so I don't really deserve an A or a B. However, I'm giving myself above a D or an F because maybe doing nothing is actually the right thing to do right now. A sentiment that I'll return to later in the video. The only thing I can really say about my parents' house is, wow, when they moved on to the property, this house was in really rough shape. It certainly wasn't livable. And the amount of work that my mom and dad have done to this place in the 7 or 8 months that they've lived here, 6 or 7 months that they've lived here, simply incredible. I urge you to go check out the before and after video playlist that goes through some of the changes and renovations that they've made on this place. I'll include a link to that above my left shoulder. Needless to say, they deserve an absolute A for their work on this goal so far. The very first projects that I took on here at the homestead this past fall was setting up these rain barrels here on the east side of the house. There's 2 reasons I set these rain barrels up. The first one, obviously, is to collect water, free rainwater. They've done a great job at that. As you can see, I've got these watering cans that I fill up whenever I need to water things that are out of reach of the hose. And I've also installed these runoff hoses here that go into the greens beds should the barrels get too full. The second reason I set up these barrels is to help control some of the flooding issues that we've had. If you remember some of those early episodes, we were dealing with some severe ponding and puddling here in our front porch. All of that was coming from this downspout, all of the water runoff. And so setting these barrels up has essentially solved that problem. We don't really get puddling and ponding there anymore. So using that logic, I wanted to set up 2 to 4 rain barrels on the west side of our house to help control some of the flooding we have over here. To be honest with you, I haven't even touched this particular project. I've had so many other things going on. So this is a project that I'd like to tackle by the end of the summer or the fall. I honestly think this will be a fall project, setting those rain barrels up here. I'll probably need to trim back this big bush, and it'll probably be 2 rain barrels that I put here, just 1 station. Needless to say, like I said, I haven't done anything in this regard. So this goal gets a big fat F. When we moved onto the property, this barn was in really rough shape. There were holes in the roof. There was industrial waste filling up the stalls and hanging out underneath the lean-tos. There was no power or lights running out here. Well, I'm proud to say that since we moved onto the property, we've done a lot of work on this barn. We put new panels in on the roof. We cleaned out all of the junk from the stalls and the lean-tos, and we've even got power running out here. Lights that work, thanks to help from my friend Nate of the Kramer Life. There's only one more thing that I want to get to here in the barn, and that's installing a new beam on the southeast corner of the south lean-to. Right now that beam isn't even connected to the roof, so we just need to get something new installed there completely. That's a project that I hope to take on at the end of summer or early fall. All in all, this has been a great job that we've done here in the barn, so I'm giving myself an A here. Currently, there's two major piles of industrial trash that remain here on the homestead. The pile that you see behind me here, as well as the old contractor shed across the wooded grove that needs to be knocked down. I always get creeped out in this place. Sometimes I wonder if somebody's living here. I'm joking, but I actually wonder that sometimes. The majority of the rest of the industrial trash was kept in the barn, which, as I discussed in my previous goal, I took care of and cleaned out earlier in the year. So that begs the question, what about this stuff? Are we going to be able to get rid of it before the end of the year? The answer is hopefully. As you might remember from a few episodes ago, we discussed how Holly received a tractor, and we now own a tractor, but it's in northwest Arkansas. We haven't figured out a way to get it here to East Tennessee yet. We actually worked through some online services to talk to some freight drivers to see what the price would be for them shipping it. And let's just say that with the prices of gas as expensive as they are right now, it's not something that we can afford right now. We're building up a fund and hope to be able to afford shipping on that tractor by sometime in September or October. Once we have that tractor, it's a fairly large tractor, it's got a nice big front loader, we'll be able to move all of this stuff into a dumpster that we get onto the property and knock down that old contractor shed and just pull all of that junk and put into another dumpster. So where does that put me in terms of a grade? Well, like I said, I took care of most of the trash in the barn, and we're trying to get rolling on this tractor to help us take care of all of this stuff. So I'm going to give myself a B here. This next goal is oddly specific. The strip that you see here behind me is typically filled up with water in the rainy season. It's a seasonal creek that we've dubbed Higgins Creek. Behind this creek is about 6 or 7 acres of back pasture that we'll definitely want to access when we start having grazing animals, ruminants like sheep or maybe eventually cows. It's hard to get back there during the rainy season because Higgins Creek gets fairly wide. So my goal for this year was to, if not build a bridge, at least figure out a way that I can get across to the back pastures on foot and with vehicles. Part of the task here is just observation, finding out how wide Higgins Creek gets during rain events and flooding events and finding the best point to where we could either build a bridge or put some sort of landmass that we can cross on. After the past several rains, including some flooding rains that we experienced, I figured that the best point to build this structure would be right here where I'm standing. This seems to be the thinnest point of Higgins Creek in rain events in the rainy season. And I actually decided that what I'm probably going to do is not build any sort of wooden bridge, but get a bunch of river rocks and fill them up at this spot, because this is also the shallowest point of Higgins Creek. Shallow enough to where I think if I were to stack up a bunch of river rocks and put them here, it would be a lot easier for me to cross on a vehicle or on foot. So where does that leave me in terms of a grade? Well, all I've done so far is observation, but that's all I've wanted to do so far. So I'm going to give myself an A, because I think sometime in the fall I'm going to actually buy the river rocks and put them here in the spot that I've chosen. One of my favorite things to do every morning is grab a cup of coffee and just walk around the property. Observe things, see what's changed, see what's new, see if I can notice any new plants that I hadn't noticed the day before. It's this active observation that leads me to the final goal, which in January I called do nothing. Nothing is just kind of a cheeky way for me to say that I want to observe things over this year. I don't want to make rash decisions. I don't want to put a building somewhere that might end up being a flood zone. I want to make sure that I have a chance to live with the land for at least 4 seasons and see how it responds to the various changes that those seasons bring. It's a sentiment that I hear among other homesteaders and permaculture experts all the time. Live with the land, absorb it, don't do anything crazy, learn from it. And while you might think that this is the easiest among all my goals, the free square on the bingo card, it actually isn't. Observing things is a very active pursuit. It's not enough to just walk around every morning and enjoy the scenery. You need to approach each acre with a very critical eye. I haven't seen these bugs before. Is that sinkhole new? Is that moss on this cedar or some sort of terrifying bark disease? You get the picture. And I think the most challenging aspect of this goal is that it takes time. It's not something that I can knock out in an afternoon or pencil in for the weekend. It's something that will honestly probably last me the rest of my life. It's funny, all this talk about things taking time reminds me of the phrase that's kind of become my motto here on the channel over the past few months. And that phrase is slowly, slowly. For us, the journey on the homestead hasn't necessarily been about moving quickly. It's just been about moving forward. Even if moving forward means moving forward an inch at a time. I remember the barn cleanout project. At the time, I was only able to devote maybe about half an hour a day to cleaning that barn out. And I remember it being such an excruciating process. I thought it would take forever. There was so much junk to get rid of. But after maybe about 2 or 3 weeks, I looked up and the whole thing was done. The whole thing was clean. I could barely believe it. I know it's such a cliche to say, but little by little, a little becomes a lot. So where does this leave me in terms of the grade that I'm going to give myself for this goal? Observe. Well, I think I'm going to give myself a grade of B here. I'll admit that I've jumped the gun on some projects, but for the most part, I've done pretty well and held back where I've needed to hold back and wait. This hasn't been easy, and anyone that tells you that homesteading is easy is lying to you. But that said, it's been absolutely worth it. I wouldn't trade it in for anything. Sometimes the things that you need to fight for are the most valuable things that you have. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. This has been very valuable for me, and I hope maybe you've learned something too. Until next time, remember, as always, slowly, slowly.